Welcome back to another episode of Following the Trend. You know, if I'm being truthfully honest with myself and you guys, I think Chapter 4 of Poppy Playtime was really not that great. Sacrifice me, I have an opinion. I keep seeing these thumbnails and titles detailing that this is like the scariest game ever. Oh my gosh! Play Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a little bit more intense than this game. Also, this is a good time to mention that I made an hour-long video about the entire Five Nights at Freddy's series, so please watch that. Before I keep on going here, it's not that I didn't like Chapter 4, okay? I thought it was an alright experience, but there were some choices made in both the gameplay and the story that I think just did not work. Not to mention the outrageous glitches I encountered. Glitches that even infected entire sections of the game. It was so bad, which I'll gladly talk about later. Out of all the chapters released thus far, I still think Chapter 3 is the best. It was better in almost every single way. I want to draw some comparisons from Chapter 3, but this critique will also emphasize what Chapter 4 did not do right in its own terms, and of course, some of the positives too. I'm sure I've ruffled some feathers already, so before you leave a dislike and tell me how much of a brain-dead sand monkey I am, let me at least defend myself. I would rather earn your dislike than simply have it thrown at me. Are we good? Alright, let's begin. Without further ado, my name is Josh, also known as Gorguinni, and I hope you enjoy. The first thing I want to talk about is the horror factor. Poppy Playtime is a horror game first, so I expected to get spooked, maybe sweat a little bit. Disappointingly, I was really not scared in the slightest. Granted, these games are not pee your pants or wearing only one earbud worthy, but I got scared once in the whole game and it was a jump scare from some black sheep or something. There really was no tension throughout my playthrough, and I think it's because of a couple of reasons. Number one is the fact that this is the 4th chapter. I know how the game functions now, and even with no change in the formula, everything you'd expect to happen still happens. I'm primarily talking about the chase scenes, such as Yarnaby, for example. He was way too easy to escape. There were no dead ends or tight corridors to run through, and it's not like you run out of stamina either. You go from point A to point B without any literal obstacles in the way, besides the urge to like this video. If I may draw some comparisons, Huggy Wuggy was in a claustrophobic dark vent. Oh, he's in the vents. Okay. Dog Day had dead ends and some of the other toys blocking your path. Here, there's nothing. And even if there was, again, I know how the game works. So all it really means is it'll take a couple of tries before I reach the safe spot. And that's another issue. This game has way too many safe locations. Probably my biggest issue besides the glitches. I'm primarily talking about areas where you're solving puzzles. One of the greatest things a horror game can do is lull you into a false sense of security, only for the game to rip the floor from underneath you. It's why games like Outlast or even, again, Five Nights at Freddy's are terrifying in their own ways because you are never safe. And even if you think you are, it's only for a temporary moment. In Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, I had complete security when solving these puzzles, because I know this game is not gonna touch me. And let me be clear, it's totally fine for a game to have sections where it's strictly for a puzzle. When it's a majority of the game's length, that's when I have an issue. It comes to a point where the game feels like one big puzzle inside a semi-scary environment. It becomes repetitive very quickly. Now, of course, there are some exceptions in Chapter 4, such as the Doctor's, boss fight. The idea here is you're running around in complete darkness, locating 4 batteries scattered throughout the area. The goal is to power up these 4 panels in the center. Seems simple enough, but the Doctor's what are called Harley bodies will attempt to block your path or downright kill you. It's actually one of my favorite sections in the game. I thought it was well structured. Some of them run away to a strategic vantage point while others chase you down. As you collect the batteries, their positions change rapidly. Even then, it wasn't that scary because of their slow movements and lack of any urgency, which I think is a good time to mention a new design choice in Chapter 4. In the previous chapters, whenever a toy would even touch you, you'd get jump scared and then you'd have to start over. Instead of immediately dying upon contact, you now can take a few hits before the game over screen. They actually removed the jump scares, yet more importantly, they reduced the amount of urgency with every single encounter because I know I can take a few hits and still succeed. That's why the Doctor's section was so underwhelming to me. I can tank hits without much hassle and press forward. The anticipation of getting caught was such a thrill-inducer in the previous games. Having a giant toy chasing after you, knowing that once you're caught you have to start over, was awesome. Now, it's really easy. It's too easy. A rather small addition to the game, but with a large impact in my opinion. Going back to the doctor's fight, yes, they get in the way, but if you've mastered the art of turning around and trying a different path, you'll be fine. Horror-wise, in the gameplay category, this game was quite underwhelming. However, if we're talking about the atmosphere, oh my body count, this chapter is actually impressive. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember the other chapters having so many corpses lying around in plain sight. I mean, sure, we saw the Hour of Joy tape, but seeing the bodies in person, well, in-game, was a gruesome surprise. I actually never expected a game like Poppy Playtime to go this far, but there I was, staring down the dark barrels of an eyeless ex-employee. It's good, although I still think Chapter 3's atmosphere and tone was better. Not just in horror, but the overall structure. The reason why is that it all felt like a cohesive experience. In such a short game like Chapter 4, backtracking to the safe haven multiple times was such a drag, and really not needed if you ask me. It took the pacing off course and left me with a fragmented experience. Also, because the safe haven was overused, it left less room to flesh out the other areas or include new ones entirely. In Chapter 3, the entire game takes place inside the orphanage, where you can explore key buildings like the school or homestead, large sections that had different level designs and atmosphere. It told the tale of the smiling critters, Capnap, and even some of the orphans. See, Chapter 3 focused on a key location in the entire story of Poppy Playtime. Whereas Chapter 4, yes, we divulged deeper into the factory, but it felt like a part 1 to the conclusion that felt rushed rather than a solid entry. Now, there were some key areas, don't get me wrong, like the Doctor's Lair for example, but most areas didn't have any significant meaning besides being a generator room or an underground power grid. I mentioned the safe haven was one such key point, and I'm honestly having a hard time whether I like it or not. See, on one hand, from a lore perspective, there is so much to unpack here, especially when involving one of the newest characters, Doey, who I'll talk about later. Others like Poppy and Kissy Wissy are seen resting here, and it's nice to see some friendly faces. On the other hand, this plays into the problem with too many safe locations again. I may be beating a dead horse here, but think about how other horror games deal with safe zones. You got a couple of options here. There are far and few in between, some are booby-trapped, others are trivial, and some games don't even have any safe locations. It's a straight rush from beginning to the end, or, you know, there's autosave. Fear and Hunger is a game I'm currently playing through, and it is a gruesome, difficult game. So anytime I come across a bed to save my game, and I breathe an audible sigh of relief. That's how safe locations should be in such a horror game. My point is, why have a safe haven structured like it's supposed to be a shop or an upgrade facility when it's not? Like, it just feels like a lot of empty space with no real value besides being a part of the story. It creates poor pacing because you have to go back and forth between the safe haven and your other objectives. Really, it feels like a checklist more than anything else. And look, I get why it's here. It's a refuge for starving toys that need shelter from the prototype. Still, having such a crucial area without much substance kinda bothers me. And then there's the new companion we get in Chapter 4, Doey. Now, I believe a horror game is at its best when it taps into the primal instincts of the player. Now, how can one accomplish such a feat? Isolation, loneliness, detachment. When a player feels totally alone is when they truly feel vulnerable. Chapter 4 by far has the least amount of isolation. When you have Doey and the other characters constantly making an appearance numerous times throughout the game, you know, I don't feel alone. I feel like I have backup throughout the entire adventure. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm in danger. Doey, however, is the exception. I put the word mostly in the title for a reason, because I do want to talk about Doey. Doey's character is so well baked that it more than makes up for him interfering with the horror elements of Poppy Playtime. He is by far the best aspect about Chapter 4, and I'll tell you why. Experiment 1322, Doey the Dough Man. The game begins with a commercial showcasing Doey's toy and a young boy named Jack, who is gifted his very own Doey. Jack also is surprised with a visit to the Poppy Playtime factory. During his visit, he leans too close to the rails and promptly falls into a vat of dough, killing the young boy. The parents are devastated but receive an ominous letter from an unnamed scientist detailing them, "You can see your son again." One of the VHS tapes details this interaction, but things don't go as intended.
They lied, and they poked, and they hurt! Susan, get away from me!
Jack? Mommy won't lie to you, Jackie. Mommy won't hurt you. I'd never hurt you.
Hey! Hey! Open this door! Oh, God. Susan! Please! Open the door! Please!
Jack has become Doey, but why did he turn on his own parents? It's because, besides Jack, there are two other children mixed into this experiment. The other responsible for the violent outburst was named Kevin Barnes. In every instant, Kevin was the problem child. Social incompetence and violent tendencies, even towards those he called friends. The other was named Matthew Hallard, a harsh contrast to Kevin Barnes. Matthew was a leader, and someone that the younger kids looked up to. Although he scored below average on his tests, he more than made up for this in his charisma. Traumatized by an unknown event that took his parents away, he sympathizes with the other toys, becoming like the godfather of the safe haven. With this in mind, Doey has a 3-split personality, all playing a role throughout your journey. Jack is the innocent, emotional one. Anytime Doey seems overly friendly or upbeat, that's Jack. Doey's main personality, Matthew, is expressed through his leadership and concern for the other survivors. He carries a lot of responsibility and thus acts with as much wisdom as he can muster up. Whenever Doey gets angry, that's Kevin's personality leaking through the cracks. It's when the safe haven is destroyed that Kevin takes over completely, transforming Doey's passive form into a grotesque reptilian-like monster. Which, by the way, he had a pretty decent boss fight. I actually didn't mind it. But we always see the aftermath of an experiment, such as Yarnaby, but we never see what they were like before. Seeing Jack in the intro and learning more about the other two adds more context to Doey's character. He's an unstable creature with a good heart, but can't handle the loss of another family. Having 3 in 1 makes for an unpredictable character. Another VHS details his concerns. Mixing these 3 personalities together, there's no telling which one's gonna actually work with the other. It's 900 pounds of dough that can turn at any moment. But when you hear all the 3 different reactions to the safe haven's destruction, it is heartbreaking. Even during the boss fight, Jack will scream for his parents. When it's all said and done, Doey says he's sorry twice, each with its own meaning. I think the first is Jack saying sorry for being bad. You know, he's an innocent child, so it doesn't take much for an apology. The second "I'm sorry" I think is from Matthew to the player. He's sorry for letting us down, for all the destruction he caused, and for not being there for the other toys like he promised to do. Out of all the characters we've seen in Poppy Playtime, Doey is my favorite. I wouldn't say he's one of my favorite characters of all time, although the recent games I have played, the story and plot aren't exactly their strong suit. My anal hole is currently bleeding in Fear and Hunger, so that's neat. So it's nice to have this change of pace with a great character and backstory. Easily the best aspect about Chapter 4, but some of the new characters didn't really get a moment to shine, which is very disappointing. Pianosaurus. How are you going to showcase him in the trailer and have him last about 5 seconds in game? Like, what was the point? Merchandise? Actually, that's probably exactly what the reason was. Other characters such as the Nightmare Critters, oh boy, they didn't even get any screen time. The only one we got to see was Bubba Chops, and even then, he was glazed over as if he was some random toy. They're a juxtaposition to the Smiling Critters, but served no purpose beyond a false hope. I would have loved to see these guys in action. Instead, we got to see nameless plushies. Wow! However, now I can let loose with the worst offender in Chapter 4, the glitches. For starters, I rest my case, Your Honor. I haven't had the game crash on me, but I've seen and heard from multiple people that Chapter 4 crashed throughout their journey more than once, which is an issue. But my problems were these 2 instances. There's a power grid puzzle near the foundation that's actually really clever. You have to manipulate the flow of electricity to open some doors, and I thought it was really fun. And then I started to notice these little hidden holes decorated around the map. There was even a tutorial showcasing you can use them to hide from Yarnaby. Okay, so Yarnaby's gonna be in this section. Great. I even got a message stating that noise can attract him to your location. So I thought, alright, I'll be stealthy. I walked around the map hiding in the shadows, avoiding a monster that never showed up. Throughout this whole time I was fixing and figuring out this puzzle, Yarnaby just was not there. I really think I missed out because from what I saw, this was a really good tense section. I bought the game on release day. I feel like he missed his timing or something. He should have been there. Honestly, this was probably my biggest disappointment in the game. I looked up this section after completing it because I'm like, why are there hidey holes to begin with? And then I figured out that Yarnaby was scaring other players and not me. Personally, I think this confirms that Yarnaby is a racist towards Egyptians, which will do numbers on Twitter. Anyways, the other glitch I had was after the doctor's fight. I got the Omni Hand and proceeded back to the safe haven. I, however, because I'm an idiot, I took a wrong turn and went down the same path you take before encountering the doctor, which reactivated the red mist puzzle before the doctor's boss fight. And I even got some of his voice lines when he's clearly dead at this point. It makes no sense. I have the Omni Hand, I already killed him, why is he talking? I didn't go that much further because I didn't want to redo everything, but like, come on, can't you at least block off that area? You're supposed to take this elevator next to the giant hallway. It's my fault that I missed it, I guess, but it was a poor showcase of preventing players from going outside the story's bounds. In the grand scheme of things, when you have a game that has poor pacing, poor horror design, glitches, and a lack of expected characters, it does create this mess of a game. I think its biggest strengths are definitely the lore and story of Doey. This chapter was rather dark in its story, more so than the other chapters. Chapter 3 may have had a terrifying, well-structured atmosphere, but as we dive deeper into the factory, it just kept getting darker. The pacing was a bit weird though. There were too many open rooms without much content. It became repetitive very quickly. Again, I don't mind chapter 4, but the other chapters were far better. If you want my honest score, I give chapter 4 a 4 out of 10. It was okay, but regardless, I am excited for chapter 5. We'll see if they pick up the quality here or shred it to bits. But I would love to hear your thoughts on chapter 4. I am playing Fear and Hunger, so that game is way more intense than this one. Trust me, I know the graphics can be deceiving, but it's crazy. But of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care everyone, and of course, stay safe.